Okay. Okay. All righty. So it's gonna do it right at 6:30. Okay. All right. Okay, you guys. Five, four, three, two, one.
Hello, hello, and good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Judge Raquel Rocky Jones, and I am here to invite you to our lovely, great, awesome voter education panel. And so let's start by saying, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? We should be asking ourselves, as well as our family members and our friends, this question every day until the last vote is cast. We must all do our part and vote. So important is this right that people have lost their lives and limbs so that we could vote. Remember, in order to vote, someone got bit, beaten, hung, burned, and spit on for us to have this precious right to vote. So let's show our leaders, past and present, John Lewis, Shirley Chisholm, Barack Obama, and Kamala Harris, that we take this right very serious. History starts with what we do right now. As I said, good evening. I am Judge Raquel Rocky Jones, and I welcome you to the Community Missionary Baptist Church Voter Education Seminar. Thank you for joining. So let's meet our panelists. We have today with us Mrs. Janice Dunn. She is the president of the Tri-Cities NAACP number 6277 chapter. We also have Mr. Traylon Rogers. He is actually the national board member for the NAACP. I always want to say NAACP, but the NAACP. And then we have Mrs. Deborah Spell. She is with Sagasi Media Group, and she is their public relations affairs expert. So I would like to start this off with each of the panelists telling us what does the right to vote mean to you? And I will start with you, Mrs. Deborah Spell.
Thank you, Rocky, Ms. Jones. The right to vote is the right of passage, just like the right to get a car. When you're 16, you get you get your driver's license and you're ready to drive. When you're 18, you get your voter's ID, your voter registration. That is a rite of passage that should not be taken here. I could not wait to get my driver's license. I could not wait to get my voter's registration ID. Those are important things that should matter to every individual. We take the right to vote. I take the right to vote very seriously because it's my voice, what I think about what's happening in the world. And if I don't like what's going on, I'm not just going to complain about it. I have a decision to make when the elections come up. You have to listen to what people are saying, what those people that we have elected, not just in Washington, but also in your city, because that's where it starts. Elections start locally, from your city, then to your state, and then to the federal government. So just remember, not just the president, because what you do, who you vote for in your city, in your state, determines what's going to happen in Washington, D.C. I vote because it's my voice. It's my voice that's being heard. No one can take that away from me. My decision, what I think. The 1965 Voter Registration Act, that gave me the right to vote, not the 14th Amendment, which everybody thinks about the rights to vote. The 14th Amendment only gave Black men the right to vote, but the 1965 Voter Registration Act gave everybody the right to vote. So I vote because those people that walked, who marched, who were beaten, who were burned, who were killed, the people who couldn't count the jelly beans in the jar, who couldn't stand on one leg to get a voter registrations card, the people like Sandra Bland, the people like Tatiana Jefferson, the people like Tatiana Jackson. Those are the people I vote for, the ones that no longer have a voice to vote. So remember, you can complain all day, but that doesn't mean a thing. If you don't cast your ballot to vote, it means nothing. Remember, your vote is your voice. So please vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Rogers. Oh, I like saying that. Mr. Rogers.
For me, I think the right to vote is specifically from a youth standpoint, it's something that we're obligated to vote. It's not something that is while it's a privilege, I think it's an obligation because as we heard earlier, people marched and fought for the right for us to vote, for the ability to be able to vote. And so for any person who just, any young person who sits aside and says that their vote doesn't count or that they'll vote in the next election or whenever it's important to them, I think that they're doing themselves a disservice and anybody else who comes after us a huge disservice because it's our obligation to vote. And it's sort of something that's been etched in our blood because for us 401 years ago, our ancestors were brought here against their will. And so when we remember about those people who didn't even know what the future held, I think this is a manifestation of what they dreamed of for young people, Black people, to be able to vote in a country that not necessarily isn't ours, but that we helped build.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much. And Mrs. Dunn.
Okay. I believe Mrs. spelled it all out from the standpoint of what our rights are and where they've come. And Mr. Rogers certainly put a tag on it as it relates to youth. But I've always liked to think of my why in voting in the sense that, yes, it's my voice. And I'd like to know that it was my one vote that Janice Dunn posed that made the difference. So if you think that way, that your one vote will count and it'll make that difference, because there have been elections in the United States that have been won by one vote. So be aware of that. And choosing not to revote isn't rebellion. And a lot of people believe that. It is a surrender. You're surrendering to the problems that exist in the world. So you have to really become an ancestor yourself. We can look back 400 years and say we should do this because they did that, but you need to do it because one day you are going to be that ancestor and you want your legacy to show that, oh, my grandmother or my grandfather did this. They voted when this happened, when there were the KKK at Friendship West and they were trying to stop us to vote or for whatever reason, but you were there and you stood your ground and you went to vote in the polls and made a difference. And like I said, I'd like to think that I'm doing this now for the benefit of my children and my children's children, so they will see the fruits of my labor. So the right to vote is not really a choice. It is an obligation, as Mr. Rogers said. Thank you.
Right. So I will take a personal point of privilege right now to tell y'all a little bit of personal stuff about the people. I will tell you that Miss Deborah Spell and Mrs. Janice Dunn happen to also be my sorority sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And so as most Greek letter organizations can tell you, this is the time that we really come out. We, as they say, show up and show out because we are trying to encourage everyone, not just the Divine Nine, but everyone to get out and vote. And then, of course, we have Mr. Rogers, our youngest panelist. I have to brag on him a bit. He is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, but he's also in law school. So, of course, I have a special affinity and affection because we're going to have another young leader among us. So let's get started with our presentation. So as I've discussed with the panelists, this is how we're going to do this tonight. We will talk about, of course, some of the things that you will see on the screen, but we will not read it to you. We all understand that everyone out there in our viewing world, you are all educated people and can read for yourself. So we will not read the slides for you. Those are for informational purposes, but we are going to use them as more of talking points for us and also transitions so we can get into other topics. So let's talk about this voter registration. So Sarah Spell, if you could talk to us a little bit briefly about this voter registration and how important that we still have this going on specifically when it comes to these mail-in ballots. People can still request mail-in ballots.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you can still submit a request for a mail-in ballot by October the 23rd. That is the last day that you can submit to request a mail-in ballot. Mail-in ballots can also be dropped into any elections office in Dallas or Tarrant County. If you let up the screen, I think you'll see the address. Yeah, there it is. Oh, did you have the address on? Did you have the address on this particular screen? Did you keep the address?
No, we didn't.
Okay,
we had the actual address.
I have it.
Okay, I have Dallas County is 1520 Round Table Drive, and that's right off of Regal Row and 35. Okay. And then the Tarrant County is 2700 Premier Street in Fort Worth, Texas.
Right.
And I actually do have those, and that will on the next few slides that we advance, it will be on there. Before we change this slide, there's one thing I wanted to talk about at the bottom, this curbside voting. Can we discuss that a little bit?
Yes. Anyone that is immobile or sick and feel that they cannot stand in line can request curbside voting. In Dallas County, there is you can call the Elections Administration and let them know that you need curbside voting. In Tarrant County, all you have to do is let the election judge know. If you have someone that's driving you there, have that person to take your ID in to the place, and they will come out and bring you the information, the polling, the election mechanism for you to vote. So you do not, and if you are, and also if you are elderly, you do not have, and you do not want to do curbside, and you were standing in line, you can also go to the front of the line in Tarrant County. All you have to do is read the Secretary of State website, and that gives you all of the information, little known information, I might say, of what you can and cannot do that they don't tell you about as far as what when you go to vote. So, but if you're an elderly person, that's something that you can also do. Also, if you find out that you have COVID, you have come down with COVID, and you had not requested, although it's still time to request a mail-in ballot, but you don't want to do a mail-in ballot, you can stay in your car and send somebody in. Please wear a mask. I know that it's not mandated in Texas, but please wear a mask. Get a doctor's certificate. It's called a special exemption, and you can still do a mail-in ballot also.
All right. And so let me, as I advance the next slide, we've already kind of talked about the mail-in ballots and that they must be postmarked still by November 3rd, everyone. And once again, you know, our election day is November 3rd. So, you know, early voting is very important. Sarah Dunn, can you please talk to us a little bit about the importance of early voting?
Well, the importance of early voting is the fact that you don't know what might happen on election day. I mean, we're here from day to day, from hour to hour. So the benefit, and as a judge, working as an election judge, what I've found is that typically people will wait till election day and then something comes up and they're not able to make it. And, or their voter ID is incorrect. One good thing with Dallas County and Tarrant County is that you can vote anywhere in your county at any polling location, including on election day. However, I said, if someone thinks they may be in those areas like Grand Prairie, for example, there's one part of Grand Prairie that is Dallas County and one part is Tarrant County. So they need to make sure. So if they go to a Dallas County and their address typically sits in Tarrant County, then they may have to go over to the Tarrant County location. So if they show up at 10 to 7, they're in line in Dallas County, but they really need to be in Tarrant County. That is the deterrent that I see. So early voting is the best. Pick a time. I mean, we have added a week, so that's one good thing by the governor. So it's really important to try to get to early voting. And I have been doing voter protection at DC3, Disciple Christian Church in DeSoto over the last 2 days. And they do have the drive-in voting. And it's actually a elections clerk that stands on the outside. And there's been a line of cars, probably anywhere from 10 to 15 cars at any given time. And so they will come up and they'll ask me questions and I will about that, and also the mail-in ballots as well, because some have come to the polling place to drop off their mail-in ballots, and that is not correct. And that is turning into a little bit of voter suppression because these are elderly people that don't want to drive down to Dallas elections office. So, but election day, it's a wonderful day. It's historic. You can always go to the election location and take a picture, a selfie or whatever. But early voting is so important to make sure that your voice is counted as soon as possible. And then it kind of gives us a pulse check of how this election is going. So you can kind of see where the votes are. They'll give you the percentages. So go ahead and early vote. We have an extra week now. So go ahead and do that. Get it out of the way and feel confident and comfortable that this election season, this administration will change.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so
I'd like to add something also. In Tarrant County, I don't know, Janice, you can add, in Tarrant County, there is, if you need transportation to the polls, there is transportation available to the polls in Tarrant County, provided by the commissioner's office, funded by the commissioner's office. All you have to do is call the elections administration's office, and they will give you information about access and what you need to do. And it is free.
Good.
That's great.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. So as you can see, we're going to dip into the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, we talked about that briefly in some of the opening remarks, but I want us to really talk about what this act and what this really meant for our people and our organization. Now, Traylon, I want to ask you, as our resident young person on the panel tonight, what is it that you can say to encourage people who, you know, as you talked about in your opening statements, that sometimes young people say, you know what, why does it matter if I vote or not? You know, somebody else is going to do it, or, you know, this is, it's not really my fight right now. You know, it's not really affecting me right now. So what would you do to address that? And I put this picture on there because this invoked in me that it was our youth that kind of started all this, right? I mean, we had SNCC, we had some other youth groups that really were important in history that helped really get this right to vote on its feet.
Yeah, I think that when we look at over history how young people have organized and mobilized, I think we oftentimes think of Dr. King as this old man who was, you know, leading old people also. When really, you know, he wasn't that old. He was, you know, most of the time in the pictures and videos we hear and see, he's, you know, early 30s or late 20s. And for the majority of us, we saw John Lewis as an 80-year-old man, but when he was, you know, I think I won't say most effective, but when he was in the actual fight, you know, fighting on a daily, he was a young man, you know, in his early 20s and in late teens. Julian Bond, I think we see a lot of people who were youth in the movement, and Fannie Lou Hamer put it the best way, that we were tired because the flag had been drenched with our blood, and so the youth were leading those movements. And so I think even now, in 2020, you see the person who recorded George Floyd's video was a teenager. You got shootings happening at schools. You got young people. Breonna Taylor was 26 years old. You got 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Dallas. You got Jordan Edwards, who was 15 years old. So we got these are things that are effective, that youth are impacted by. And topics like defunding the police is something that's being led by millennials and Generation Z, but it's led by us to impact the generation directly after Generation Z. Because when we talk about taking the money away from the police, we're talking about investing into parks and recs and into the youth. And so I think that all of these things are on the ballot, whether or not we know it. And so suppression is real. And so what the Voting Rights Act of 1965 attempted to do was to fight against the voter suppression. And I think now we're in 2020 where we need another one to fight against voter suppression, because before we went live, we talked about how long the lines were, and the pollers, the people working at the polls were moving as fast as they could, but that was a form of suppression, because if we can't have access to as many, we need more access to open polling places in the county. And so people who are like myself, who came home to vote, should be able to vote and be able to get back to class the next day, or to be able to vote and go to work within the next 30 minutes. So we still have a lot of voter suppression going on. And so to look at this picture in black and white, it can be easily one of our faces in 2020.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, what I would like to say,
Go ahead.
Can I say a little bit? Yeah, Traylon is right, but you know, we look at the Voters' Rights Act in 1965, and as he said, we need a new one. We don't really need a new one. We just need to restore what we had. And 2016 election was the first presidential election in 50 years without full protection of our voters' rights. And so we have to understand, like I said, this administration in the last 4 years has cost a lot. Of course, the late Justice Scalia and Roberts indicated that this act was no longer relevant. But it took Ruth Bader Ginsburg to say that it was. It's like throwing out this act is like going into a rainstorm without an umbrella just because you're not getting wet right now. So that's something that Traylon is right. We really need to be pushing. And I know the National NAACP Legal Defense Fund is filing litigation because of it. And I don't know if anybody got a chance to hear the hearings on the new justice that they're planning to appoint, and probably will, that Kamala Harris indicated this same act, and that the NAACP, what they have done, and wanted to know how she would rule on it. And of course, she's been very vague. So these are things that we need to be involved in, And before we get to the electoral colleges, I know that's where we're going. When we are going to the polls, and when I was talking about early voting, you have to vote top of the ballot all the way down. We need to get people out of office locally that are not doing anything for our communities. And that happens in Dallas County quite a bit. So we need to be very vigilant about what is going on in our local. And then, like I said, top down, bottom up, we need to check off everybody on that ballot, know what platform they have, and vote accordingly for your values.
Thank you. Thank you.
Correct.
Now, Deborah, can we, I know that prior to this, what brought one of the things about for us to have this voter education is when we're watching the news, my mom is addicted to CNN and MSNBC and all of those shows, and they always talk about the Electoral College. So I want us to spend just a brief time talking about what the Electoral College is.
Okay. Well, the Electoral College was invented to elect the president and vice president. That's by our forefathers. That is the whole reason. And so they couldn't come up with a compromise. So that's how they decided on the Electoral College. And it wasn't harmonious at all. One group wanted to decide that it was going to be too much corruption going on. Another group wanted the people to decide, but then they said that the people weren't smart enough to decide, who would be the best candidate. And then another group decided they didn't want the president to have that much control. So they decided to come up with the Electoral College, where each state would get so many electors. And that has been the case for let's see, how many years?
Because it looks like the 1800s, right?
Yeah, through the 1800s. Yeah. And the 12th Amendment, they tried to change the the delegates are divided about how they allot who is going to be voted for. And the southern states, because they had slaves, they were going to always outnumber all of the northern states. So they had to come up with the 3/5 compromise. So that's how Black people became 3/5 of a person. And so the allegations became that southern states would get 3/5 of a vote for a slave. Now, the District of Columbia, which is not a state, every other state got one vote for each House of Representatives, and then they got 2 senators. But the District of Columbia, which is not a state, got 3 delegates. And that's how they determine the presidents. And then, but sometimes the electors were not satisfied. Let me back up a little bit. The electors were selected during each state's national convention. States have a primary convention, which is usually held in March. Texas has one. They have a Democratic one and they have a Republican one. It's called a convention, primary convention, and they have we have precincts. You go into your different precincts. You select different committeemen, committee persons, not men, committee persons. And then you go to, from those particular committee people, you are selected then or elected to go to the state convention, which is normally held in June or July. And from the state convention, you then vie. It's just like any other political convention. You vie to be a
delegate?
candidate to the national convention, and that's how the electors are selected to go to Washington to cast the vote. And the vote is by whoever has the most popular votes, because that's who actually wins. And I wanted to let you know that you see that every state does not get the candidates to come to their states. It's only the battleground states, because they have a certain number of candidates. And I just want to give you an idea of which states have so many electoral votes. Like California has 55, Pennsylvania has 20, Minnesota has 10, Texas has 39, Illinois has 20, Georgia has 16, Wisconsin 10. I don't have Iowa down here. But every state, let me tell you, this is why the census is important. Because the census, which is drawn which we have every 10 years, it determines whatever the count on the census, that determines how many legislators we receive. And from those legislators determines whether the Republicans or the Democrats are going to have control of your state house.
Yeah.
And they get to draw the map. And so they draw
redistricting, like redistricting.
Yeah, it's called redistricting. Okay. And so that's why the Democrats had more votes, but because of the popular vote, and they won states with the most electoral votes, and because of redistricting, and they drew the maps the way they wanted with little.
It was more Republicans.
Yes, they had more Republicans because they drew it the way they wanted to. The last time in 2010, that they ended up having more votes, so they can draw it anyway. So that's why it's so important that we complete the census. Now so it's important to do the census. It's important to vote, because it's all the same. Trump won the Electoral College because of the census, the votes that he won. The people were so mad because how the jobs were lost. They didn't like Clinton. They didn't like Trump. So they voted whoever was the lesser of two evils. And so they just gave it to Clinton, because she didn't even show up in those states, in those blue collar states. And so the white people just voted for her. The black people didn't even show up. There was like 230 some thousand Black people that didn't even vote in Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, and in those particular states. So if we don't show up, we don't have anything to say.
Yeah.
No vote, no voice.
Yeah, and Janice, I kind of wanted to have you jump in right here. So this is the first time it made perfect sense to me that because the popular vote, so how it's supposed to be with the Electoral College is that everyone knew that the popular vote was won by Hillary Clinton. But because we had Republican electors, they went ahead and cast the ballot for Trump. So can you kind of talk to us about once again, we have to get out there. We can't just, sit idly by.
Yeah, as Ms. Spell indicated, that most of the time it's really about an election. Once again, it's whether or not you are voting to the degree. And Texas, I can just speak on Texas for that matter. And as she indicated, I thought it was 38 votes, but maybe 39. They changed it. But from the standpoint of the electoral, if
you're right, Janice, 38.
Okay. So if they feel that the popular vote is weighing toward a particular candidate, then their constituency is going to be more weighing toward that popular vote, which he did win in Texas. So the other states and in the battleground states, again, that's where he's going to get, or the candidate that gets the popular vote in those states, likely the electorals are going to vote for that candidate. So that's why Trump won, because it was the electorals that were more convinced by that community that he was the better choice, and had nothing to do with. But it was actually indicated, and I don't know, Rocky, if that was the conversation we were having the other day, that in Texas, we really should have had more electoral college votes.
Yep.
Or should have gotten the electoral college toward Hillary Clinton in 2016. But I think one of the things that, we failed to look at, like I said, that's why it's so important what people are saying, vote like your life depended on it, because that is what it depends on, and how you convince those electorals to make sure that they're going to vote the candidate that we want.
Yeah. So we talked about this. Go ahead.
Okay, if you would go to the preceding slide and move up, and you will show
which one?
The one that we were talking about. Go forward, move up, where it showed the ones that went rogue.
Yeah, there it is.
Move up. Yeah, move up. And
I don't think it'll go up.
You didn't include those states that.
Yeah, they're in there. It's Colorado.
Yeah, because those are the states where there were 4. I think there were 9 of those states that were listed there. There were 9 electors that voted for other people. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, some other people that were on the ballots. They went rogue. They didn't vote for who they were supposed to do. So see, there's nothing that prevents that elector from voting what the state tells them to do.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. So we talked about this a little bit, and we can delve into it. Voter suppression. So as we could see, this is what the federal government deems as voter suppression, either legal or illegal, by way of laws, administrative rules, or tactics that prevents eligible voters from registering to vote or voting. So we can all probably give stories about what we've seen and how we've seen voter suppression happen in our community. But I wanted to ask this question. So Traylon, just these few years you've been on this earth, and the other panelists addressed this question as well. As a Black community, what do you believe are our greatest struggles, and why, when it comes to voting?
I think in the few years that I've seen, even before I was voting, I worked the poll. Well, I didn't work them, but I watched them. Well, I did work them, and I watched them also with the LDF. So I think some of the stuff we would see were police officers were parking at the polling station to intimidate people from voting. Afraid if they had a warrant that they couldn't vote because it might trigger something that would allow the police to know. So that was one of them. Patients, We just don't have enough patience to sit in a 2-hour line. And like I said earlier, it's not the, I guess it's less of patience and more so that we need more polling places. But, like, if you can't sit in a 2-hour line, you just can't sit in a 2-hour line. If you have to work, doubles and triples to make sure your family is fed, then you have to do that. And if you don't have time and if the time doesn't permit, then, you just we don't have all the luxuries that our counterparts have. We can't take off the entire day to go, vote and take pictures and do all that stuff because we just don't have that luxury. And so there are several reasons, but I think the biggest one is the fact that the way that they the way that they set the polling system up for us to be able to vote, and the way that they are clever, and by they I just mean the collective they, that they are clever in suppressing us. I think it's really ridiculous. No matter what, from what area, whether it's the private sector, the government sector, they just do it, and it causes us to be impacted negatively.
And I want to say, Janice, we had talked about this offline before, that suppression mostly impacts, as you see from this slide, African Americans and Latinos. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, that's very accurate. And I've worked in Tarrant County as an election judge and also Dallas County. And what I found was, the county elections office will typically try to make sure in those areas of concentration of Hispanics that they have a Spanish-speaking clerk and Vietnamese. There's an area in Tarrant County that has a high population of Vietnamese. So they try to do a good job of locating those types of clerks to assist with those voters that are concentrated in that population. But typically with African Americans, and what we think, and as Traylon mentioned, the police officers at the polling place, that's one way of suppressing, and they don't want to go and like he said, they may have a warrant out for their arrest, but what they need to understand is if they haven't been convicted of that crime, that they still can vote. Technically, we all, the NAACP, should be down at the county jails registering folk to vote that have not been prosecuted on any crime, but they still can do mail-in ballots because they haven't been convicted of the crime. So there are things that we can do better as a community as it relates to voter suppression to try to, get this thing right. The other about convicted felons that, which typically is in the Black community, because we know that our Black men and women and Hispanic, Black and brown, are more likely to have been arrested and convicted of crimes than our other counterparts. So they will have a record, but if that record has been adjudicated and they've done their time and off paper and no longer on probation, as it would be said, they can vote. But as we know, in the situation with Crystal Mason in Tarrant County, I believe that was a setup. So this judge knew that she should not be completing this provisional ballot because they apparently knew that she was a convicted person. But I have to say that that's one thing that election judges, and I educated some that I know are working as an election judge now about that, to make sure that they're not allowing that person to violate that law, because it's almost like they were encouraging it for Crystal Mason, knowing that she was committing perjury, because that is a legal affidavit and she can go back to jail, which Abbott is proposing to do.
Yes.
So with that being said, it affects our community huge. Whereas, Shelley Luther can not close her salon down and get convicted and the lieutenant governor pay her fine and they throw out her case. But somebody that truly didn't know she can vote or could not vote at that time because she was not completely off probation, she was trying to exercise a right that hadn't been given back to her at that time, and they want to put her in jail. So yes, it does affect our community more. It's going to always affect our community more until we get people in these positions, again, locally, these judges. And I know we have on the call the Honorable Judge Rocky Raquel Jones, Sarah, but we need more judges like yourself, and not necessarily our skin color, but that will look at the law and apply it accordingly. So
Really?
that's what we need to do. Like I said, we just need to do better in our community of education, as Community Fellowship is doing right now with this call to educate people on what they can or cannot do as it relates to voting.
Right.
And we were almost, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's okay.
Charles, but I was going to say that, yeah, the most important thing that I wanted to say about that felon's right to vote, that most people aren't aware that as long as you're not, as they say in my courtroom, if you ain't on paper,
Right.
If you're not on paper or not on probation, that you automatically retain the right to vote.
Right.
You're done with parole or probation. But this is what we have to know as a community.
Right,
You
right.
still have to register. That's
Right.
what people understand, that yes, you do get your right to vote back. You retain that right. It's automatic. But
Right.
if you don't
Correct.
take the steps to register, then your vote can't be cast. So just anybody you know that has been on parole or probation and they're done and it's complete. You were on probation 20 years ago. You have the right to vote. You can always register to vote and your voice can be heard.
Yes.
Sarah Spell, I wanted to put up this slide, and we're almost to the end now, but you talked about the
Yeah, I just want to just make a note.
Okay, go ahead.
What Janice was saying about Crystal Mason. I was in a meeting with her and her attorneys, and her neighbor, which was the election judge where she voted, knew that she was still on probation. He knew it after she cast that provisional, not a real ballot, a provisional ballot. He then took that ballot to Sharon Wilson. He didn't file anything. He took it directly to Sharon Wilson,
Who's the district attorney in Tarrant?
the district attorney in Tarrant County. That election judge took it directly to Sharon Wilson because he knew she had always had problems with her neighbor, the election judge. Always.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I knew
it wasn't. It was definitely a setup.
Yeah, that's what I said. I did know that backstory, but like I said, as the election judge, again, I would caution that there should be some criminal charges against that judge, knowing that. And because I became educated after, of course, the Obama years, everybody wanted to vote the Obama years. And I had a lot of convicted felons coming. They weren't on the roll. But my lack of education, that was my first time being a judge, I gave them the provisional ballot, but I knew they were on paper because you could get that information when you contact the county. And they look up their name and they could tell us whether they're still on probation. But because they would argue with you, well, my wife is here, but I'm not here, or my husband, whatever. So you would give them a provisional ballot, but I wouldn't have taken it to the district county. But what I tell people when I gave them a provisional ballot is that you have to go down to the county and ratify that. You have to show proof that you are a registered voter in Tarrant or Dallas County and not. So I know. So that's why I said that was a setup for her. But I did know the backstory. So thank you.
Yes, because I'm an election judge also.
Okay.
Yeah.
So y'all, we're getting close to the end, but this is one thing that I want us to address before we go. So we all know that, we got this one voice, one vote, it matters. However, every year, y'all, and I want each of the panelists to address this, and I'll start with you, Traylon. Every year we hear, oh, this is the most important election of our lifetime. Oh, we have to do this. I mean, we heard it in 2008. We heard it in 2012. We heard it in 2016. You hear that every election. This is the most important election of our lifetime. So how would you summarize that, and why do you think that this is the most important election? And that will be our last question for everyone.
I think the reason we continue to hear that is because each election gets more and more important. I don't think anybody ever could imagine a president in office who had in 2020 who had a blatant disregard for the existential value of a human being. I won't get into details, but I just think that I just think that I think the tactics that we are using, by saying that this is the most important, it's gotten old with Generation Z and the millennials. We don't want to hear about how important it is. We want to know what's on the ballot and how does it affect me. That's what my generation wants to know. How is this going to impact me? It's a sad reality, but it's real. What's in it for me? And so I think once we start telling my generation what's in it for them, funding for HBCUs is on there. We got the housing prices for the next 20, 30 years is on the ballot. I mean, there are several things. The job market is on the ballot. Our livelihood is pretty much on the ballot. The separation between church and state is on the ballot. I think once we start saying what's in it for the youth and for the activators and movers and shakers of my generation, I think it's our responsibility to educate our peers. Because of course, the older generations are going to say that this is the most important because they want us to come out and vote, which is what they know how to do. And so I think everybody has to do what they can do to make sure that we get out and vote. So I think that saying that it's the most important election, I don't know if there's ever been a more truer statement besides, maybe Andrew Jackson or Abraham Lincoln. But I think that for certain, this is probably the most important election that has ever happened in the history of the United States because the current occupant is a nightmare. So that's it. There.
Okay. Sarah Spell, do you have some final closing words for us?
Yes. Our democracy is on the ballot. If we don't vote, we are going to turn into an autocracy. And if he is given another chance to rule, he will be king for life, and I will move to Canada. This is really a time to really listen. If you have not been listening for the past almost 4 years, you've seen he has said everything. He means everything that he has said. Our democracy, humanity, climate change, health care, wealth, housing, our lives are at risk. And I just fear, it's just a real fear that I have that if he's elected, and I cannot, it was like a nightmare when he was elected in 2016. And I just could not imagine a world in this 2020 has been a nightmare, and I could not imagine 2021.
Wow.
It can't happen. We are going to vote and vote for a dignified leader that's going to get us out of this mess. A person that believes in the humanity, democracy, and making allies again, and getting us back the trust and respect of other nations. Thank you.
All right. And Sarah Dunn, Miss Dunn.
Yes.
It's important. Why is this the election of a lifetime for us?
Well, I think the Declaration of Independence, it offers us the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we know that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and something that in 2019 would have never thought that we would be in. I like to think that every election is the most important election of my life, because my life is not promised past today. So this is very important from the standpoint of my legacy that I will leave. So with people thinking that, again, their voice, their one vote doesn't make sense, they should rethink that. Again, I work constantly from the standpoint of social action through the NAACP and Delta Sigma Theta social action committees, that we have programs to try to educate people on what it takes. And when you're talking to people at the polls and you hear their responses, they don't think about it past themselves. And sometimes it is, well, what's in it for me? I think I put that in my notes as well, Traylon. It's what's in it for me. But I like to think past myself sometimes and think about the kids. And so with that being said, we have to think past our individual selves and how this is going to impact, even if it's our closest circle. It could be our neighbors' kids or our cousins' kids or whomever. We need to make sure that we get out the vote, that everybody understands why their vote will make a difference. But I think as long as we have the media that we have and this platform that Community Baptist Mission Baptist Church has given us tonight, that this is offering individuals that have joined in an opportunity to learn some things that maybe they will go out and early vote and make a difference. And so this impact will be made, and we can say that this was the most important election of our lives, and we were able to change this administration, that we would no longer have to have that nightmare that we had back in 2016, and we still haven't woke up from it.
Wow, that's a good way to put that. I tell people the story, and Traylon, this is I don't know how old you were at this time, but I just remember going to sleep, and the election was very close between Bush and Al Gore. Never forget, I went to sleep, and then when I woke up, the president of the United States was George Bush, the son, the second. And I vowed after that year, I would never go to sleep during the election again, because I was afraid if I went to sleep, I would wake up, Obama wouldn't have won. So in 2008 and in 2012, I pulled some all-nighters. So I would suggest, and I would hope, and I would pray that everyone on this call and our viewing on Facebook Live, that you would have that same, passion, hopefully, that if you have not gone out and voted early, please, please do so. We can't stress enough that we want you to vote, but not only do we want you to vote, I tell people all the time, when you're on your way to vote, pick up and take 5 people with you. However many people you can fit in your car. Because this is the most important of our lifetime, because if we don't let that one voice that we have, that one vote that we have, it won't be heard. So the only way we can do that is to make sure that we get out to the polls. So we ask that, if you have any questions or anything you didn't get answered in this discussion that we had tonight, I'm pretty sure that I know that my church at Community Baptist will allow you to send questions to us. We have a website. You can pose those questions. And if there's anything that we could not answer and we did not provide for you today, we will make sure and answer those questions if you send those in to the church and if you have it posted on our church website. So I can't tell you all, thank you enough. Thank you To Sarah Deborah Spell, thank you. Sarah Janice Dunn, and Traylon, thank you so much. I knew you flew in to vote. Fly in again to vote. Drive as close as you can to Dallas, and please cast your vote. But I don't want you to miss school, okay?
Hey, look, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth missing.
Good.
Thank you, son.
Thank you.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we only had an hour of your time. It is now 7:29, and we want to leave you with these words. As you heard the young Traylon say, Martin Luther King, he may have started this fight for us back in 1965, but it's time for us to take it home. What we do now will be history for all of those to come after us. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Vote.
Ooh, Lord.
That was good.